Well, hello there. Good afternoon, Rotarians. Good to see you all today. Welcome to the June 19th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm Kevin Kassir, your president for a few more weeks. It is Juneteenth Day, and Hal Chase was always a big proponent before it ever became a national holiday. So just keep Hal Chase in your mind. For those that don't know, Hal Chase was a longtime member here that passed away about a month ago or so. I heard there was no secrets around the Rotary Club, as last week President Tim Lewis shared that I was golfing last week, so thank you, Tim. Tim was my partner.
Hey, you won though. You gotta tell them that.
Tim was my partner in this invitation a couple years ago. I guess that's just not going to happen again. I did win my partner, and I won my flight, which Tim couldn't make happen 2 years ago. So, but anyway, had a good time, and I heard Tim did a good job. Other than that, so first of all, thanks. I wanted to thank our greeter today, Tej Dewan, and his son Aiden. So thank you both for stepping up. And now I'd like to welcome up past President Sean Mullen, who will lead us in a moment of inspiration, Pledge of Allegiance, four-way test, and we'll get an opportunity to greet each other. Sean, thank you for doing that.
Thank you, President Kevin. Is it something I did to the microphone that doesn't like me?
I didn't do it.
There we go.
Fellow Rotarians and guests, good afternoon. Today, our nation observes Juneteenth, a federal holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in the United States, a date that holds deep historical and emotional significance. Juneteenth marks June 19, 1865, the day Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, with a transformative announcement. He issued General Order Number 3, declaring that all enslaved people in Texas were free. This declaration came more than 2 years after President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Granger announced, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that of employer and hired labor," unquote. Because of the slow speed of information and active resistance by slaveholders, many people in Texas had remained enslaved long after they should have been freed. Granger's announcements changed everything, setting off celebrations of liberation that became the roots of Juneteenth, a day of joy, remembrance, and hope in Black communities across the country. Here in Iowa, we have a small but interesting name connection. General Gordon Granger shares the last name with Charles T. C.T. Granger, a prominent engineer with the Milwaukee Railroad in the 19th century, and the namesake for, say it with me, Granger, Iowa. While there's no known family connection between the two, the shared name reminds us that national history and local history often intersect in surprising ways, and that the echoes of major events like Juneteenth ripple through every community, including our own. In 2021, Juneteenth became a federal holiday, finally receiving national recognition after more than 150 years of community celebration and reflection. It's a day to honor the suffering and strength of those who lived through slavery and those who endured in its long aftermath. As Rotarians, committed to equality, truth, and and service above self. Let us honor Juneteenth by striving to create a more just, inclusive, and compassionate world. May the courage and resilience of those who waited for freedom and those who kept hope alive continue to inspire our actions today. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test.
Is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Take a few moments and greet your fellow Rotarians.
This wasn't connected.
Susie, I'm sorry I didn't say hi. I walked by and I'm going, I recognize that face.
Good to see you again. Susie, good to see you.
I got the inside scoop.
This was outside of
All right, thank you, everybody. We have a few guests that I'd like to recognize now. I'd ask the guests to, when I call your name, to stand and remain standing, and then we'll recognize you all at once. So first off, we have Cindy Snell, the spouse of Mark Snell. We have Aidan Dewan, as I mentioned, the son of Tace, who's home from college. And we have Kimberly Bates, president of Cutting Edge Success, a guest of Melissa Merrifield. Welcome, everybody. We also have a birthday in the house today. Dave Busek, happy birthday. And next we have the segment of Did You Know, where you learn a little something. So today we're going to learn about where in the world did the saying of best things since sliced bread, where'd that come from? You all said that, right? Best things since sliced bread? Okay, so first we got to start with the invention of sliced bread, which has an Iowa connection, believe it or not. So Otto Rowender was born in Des Moines, July 7th, 1880. And then he went on, his family took him to Davenport, and he grew up in Davenport, Iowa. And there he became an apprentice to a local jeweler there. He then moved to St. Joseph, Missouri, and had opened up 3 jewelry stores. And in his work with watches and jewelry, he had an invention and machinery area. And he was convinced that he could develop a bread slicing machine. And so sold the business and put all of his money and efforts to develop and manufacture. He successfully designed it in 1927 and applied for patents and so forth, and sold his first machine to a baker friend named Frank Bench, who had installed it at the Chillicothe Baking Company in Chillicothe, Missouri in 1928. And the first sliced bread was sold at that time. later sold to a variety of other bakeries, and it became a standard. But on the loaf of bread of Chillicothe Bakery, it said, "The greatest forward step in baking industry since bread was wrapped." And then, so that's the start of it. And then Red Skelton, believe it or not, in 1952 was on an interview, and he was being asked about the future of television. And Red said, "Don't worry about television, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread." And that is the story of the best thing since sliced bread. There you go. And now, I realize he's no Red Skelton, but we're gonna pull up Doug Saltzgaber to lead us in a little Rotarians on the floor laughing. Doug?
Thank you, President Kevin. And apparently this is my last time doing this. Another good meal. I've been taking Dr. Patty's advice back there, trying to make sure my plate is very colorful. So I bought a jar of red sprinkles, and I put that on everything I eat. So I think that takes care of that. No? No? And hasn't Kevin been doing a good job this year?
Yes, yes.
I'll bet many of you didn't know, before Kevin got into the corporate world, he was actually a monk. And when he began, he had to take a vow of silence. And every 5 years, they had a performance review. So at the end of the first 5 years, he got his performance review, and the superior monk said, "All right, you're allowed to say 2 words." Kevin said, "Food, bad." Another 5 years went by, and had his performance review again, and again he got to utter 2 words. Kevin said, "Bed hard." All right, I'll put that in your record. Another 5 years go by, and the 15-year performance review gets done, and turns to Kevin and said, "You have anything to say?" "I quit." And the Supreme Monk said, "Doesn't surprise me, you've done nothing but complain ever since you got here." All right, so we're talking about insurance today, I understand. And getting on the internet, I found out some of the insurance claims some of our members have tried to make. New member Brad Freeman, car insurance claim reads that he filled out, "I drove to the wrong house and collided with a tree I did not have." David Ullman, who's explaining this to his insurance company, "The guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a number of times before I hit him." Greg Edwards was going to work at 7 a.m. in the morning. I drove out of my driveway straight into a bus. The bus was 5 minutes early that day. Tim Lilowitz. The accident happened because I had one eye on the truck in front of me, one eye on the pedestrian, and the other eye on the car behind me. He's an attorney, so I'm sure he got by with that stuff. Dr. Jeff Stickle was asked by the claims people, could either driver have done anything to avoid the accident? Jeff replied, could have traveled by bus. Sean Mullins. Yeah, you were laughing.
Yeah.
Well, Sean hit a cow. He was asked, what warning did you give? Sean said, well, I honked. Then he was asked, what warning did the other party give? Moo. Skeet Wooten. I recovered from sliding on the ice, pulled away from the side of the road, glanced at my mother-in-law seated beside me, and headed over the embankment. Dave Music. I thought my window was down, but I found it was up when I tried to put my head through it. And Kitty. I saw a slow-moving, sad-faced old gentleman as he bounced off the roof of my car. It was okay, turned out he was a Kiwanis member. And then, excuse me, the best claim was by a woman saying her car got hit by a submarine. Turned out the Navy informed the wife of a submariner that was that her husband was crafted to do back in port. She drove to the base to meet him and parked at the end of the slip where the sub was to berth. An inexperienced sailor was steering the sub, and it rammed the end of the slip, breaking the section away, causing her car to fall in the water. The Navy did pay the claim. That's a true story. Thank you, everyone.
And do appreciate again Doug and Skeet stepping up this year and handling this. It was a tough challenge to them, and they did a
Failed
great,
miserably.
they did a great job. And now for the introduction of our keynote speaker, past President Bruce Kelly.
Thank you, President Kevin. It's a tough time in the insurance industry. Have you ever wondered how an insurance company's CEO leads team members to sell insurance business in 40 states with insurance premiums priced to make a profit? Well, it's not easy. Today's speaker, Scott Jean, will give you a sense of how he does it. He came to EMC Insurance as an intern, rose to leadership in the actuarial department, and oversaw other departments before becoming CEO in 2020. He earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Iowa State University and achieved a fellowship in the Casualty Actuarial Society, so he knows very well what EMC must charge its policyholders in order to pay the true claims, pay and all expenses, and make a profit. Scott is very active in our community and serves nationally on insurance industry boards. He leads EMC Insurance with a commitment to keeping insurance human. He and his wife Natasha have 5 children and live in West Des Moines. Let's give a warm Rotary welcome to Scott Jean.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, and I would agree, Kevin, that was not Red Skelton, but it was still entertaining anyway. That was great to get a little insurance humor mixed into the group today. So, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to join you this afternoon. I always welcome the opportunity to get out and talk about some of the things happening in EMC and just in the insurance industry and industry in general. One of my favorite topics I've ever talked about is leadership, and I love talking about building trusting relationships. But that's not the topic today. I was asked to speak about what's happening in the insurance industry, so we're going to keep it a little drier than maybe the trust conversation would have been, but hopefully still be a little bit lively. Now, one thing I wanted to comment on Mr. Kelly. Most of you probably know he retired as CEO of EMC back in 2000. And I always had a high level of respect for Bruce, but I didn't realize he was a fortune teller either. See, he retired in March of 2020, so my second day in the job as president and CEO after being at EMC for 34 years was to send everybody home. We're gonna flatten the curve for 2 weeks, right? So that was the second day of the job. Then follow that up that summer with the George Floyd incident and the riots that happened in Chicago and Minneapolis. We saw a number of buildings that we insured burned down. And then later on that summer, the derecho comes through. So to put it in all perspective, EMC's largest loss ever was the Parkersburg tornado, which you may recall back in the late, I think 2007, 2008, which cost EMC about $40 million. The derecho, when it went through this entire state of Iowa, brought us about $180 million worth of loss from that one single event. So 4.5 times the single largest event that we had ever had in the history of our company since 1911. So Bruce, in his foresight, said, you know what? I'm predicting the future. Now is a great time to get on. I didn't realize he had that skill set. So a little bit about EMC. We're a mutual property and casualty insurance company based here in Des Moines. We have 17 offices spread throughout the country, broken into 10 separate regions. We were founded back in 1911 in conjunction with the Iowa Manufacturers Association. We have 2,200 team members that are spread across 46 different states, some working remote, some working within our offices. And we used to write personal lines, but late, I think it was 2017, 18, we exited the personal line space. So now we write commercial lines, write most of the schools in the state of Iowa, bond, and life insurance. So Bruce mentioned our new theme, our new tagline of keeping insurance human. And that's what it's really all about. You see a lot of carriers that are moving away from the human relationships, and we really believe at EMC that human interactions, human relationships are what drive the business forward. So as some companies are trying to eliminate people from the equation, we are introducing people into the equation even more so, and really doubling down and focusing on the importance of relationships. We do that by also focusing on our purpose of improving lives. We want our team members, our policyholders, everyone to understand that that's why we exist. So it's not just a matter of risk transfer, it's a matter of managing risk. We want to help reduce claims so that the employees of the insurance, of the companies that we insure, don't have to get injured in the first place. So they can go home and play catch with their kids. But we want to invest back in our communities, and we do so in a number of different ways. You see a few things represented here. If you look out the window, you can see the temporary sign at EMC Expo Center. We got the naming rights for that beginning of the year, which was formerly Ivy Hall, I think the 100,000 square feet venue, but it's been a great opportunity for us to really get better name recognition for EMC in Iowa, but really across Iowa or across the country, because a lot of events are hosted here in Des Moines, including the Global Insurance Symposium, which brings people from all over the world into Des Moines for a 3-day period in March or April. Habitat for Humanity, Easter Lake, Girls in the Run, the EMC Downtown Park. We have a foundation that gives over $1.5 million a year to local charities, nonprofits, and we have VTO and had over 6,000 hours of VTO that was used last year by EMC team members. So finding ways to give back to our communities. So one thing you may not know is the insurance industry is very big in the state of Iowa. Iowa is home to over 200 insurance companies that are headquartered here in Iowa. And it's the second in the nation for the amount of people that were employed in the finance and insurance space. It represents 9,800 jobs within our state, and that's about 2.7% of all jobs within the state of Iowa. And it's also the birthplace of numerous insurtech companies. As I mentioned, the Global Insurance Accelerator brings companies from all over the world in for a 3-month mentoring with insurance leaders. And we've really seen a lot of these companies pivot and then really expand and become very successful companies as a result of coming through Iowa and working with a lot of the companies here. So you don't typically think of Iowa as being an insurtech or a technology hub, but we have, through the Global Insurance Accelerator, really seen a lot of talented people come through with some great business plans. Now, one thing we'll talk a little bit about is this idea of a hard market. And so Bruce alluded to the fact that it's a difficult time to be in insurance. In fact, a lot of insurance companies, especially property and casualty insurance companies, don't make a profit on a regular basis. In fact, EMC has had gone 8 consecutive years without making an underwriting profit. Now, we do have investments. We make some money in the investment world, but it's been a real challenging time for insurance companies over the past 8 to 10 years for a variety of reasons. And you see some of those things represented here, from storms to wildfires, court cases, and then just significant changes in technology. But when I talk about a hard market, what exactly is a hard market? It's really defined as the upswing in the insurance market cycle, when premiums increase, when coverage terms are restricted, and capacity for most types of insurance decreases. So what causes that? Well, it can be interest rates, it can be what's happening in the stock market. So if companies aren't able to make money in the stock market or in their investments, they've got to look to start making money in their underwriting. Inflation has a huge impact. Products just cost more and more, and so that inflation constantly puts more pressure on insurance companies that have to increase their rates. Changes in weather patterns. It's been a significant change. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then reinsurance capacity. So reinsurance is insurance that insurance companies buy. So when I talked about the derecho, $180 million, we didn't keep all that. Some of that went to our reinsurers. But when that happens and reinsurers are taking a lot, they're putting through a lot of rate increases. In fact, we saw like a 200% increase in our reinsurance costs, and we saw our capacity cut in half. So when you have that type of thing happening, it puts a lot of pressure on companies to find other ways because our costs are increasing. So a couple of the top issues in the insurance industry in 2025, which I think everyone will have some appreciation for. One is continued severe weather patterns. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then also legal system abuse. Legal system abuse is something that I've been pretty passionate about, spending a lot of time on, and we'll talk a little more about some of the primary things that are driving that. And for any attorneys in the room, I'll just ask that you follow along with me. This chart is going back to 1980, and it's showing the number of billion-dollar events adjusted for inflation. Right, so yeah, we'd expect the number of billion-dollar storm events to increase over time because things cost more. But this has actually already been adjusted for inflation. And so you see back at the far left, you see beginning back in 1980, pretty low. And then as you move to the right, there's a significant trend. You see that the numbers of billion-dollar events for the insurance industry increasing substantially. If you look at the far right, you see the last few years, but you see a green bar really beginning to emerge a lot more strongly than what it is in previous years. And that is convective storms. So there's types of storms that we see in Iowa, the derechos, tornadoes, hail events, straight line wind events. There has been a significant shift in weather patterns in recent years. And some of it has to do with where buildings are being put up. You know, I get out around the country in a lot of different locations around the country. And places that used to be farm fields now have billions of dollars worth of property located on them. So that's driving some of that. But what's also driving it is the changing storm patterns. And so that puts a lot of pressure on insurance companies to try to make money in property insurance. Because when you have those storms happening, it also causes restriction of coverage. So like there are a number of insurance companies that have left the state of Iowa on personal lines because they found it too difficult to make a profit. So rather than just exiting all lines, they just exited personal lines. And a lot of that is because of these storms that are really driving that. And so one important thing that insurance companies have to do, we have to diversify our book, right? We can't just write all property because if you have a really bad storm year, it's going to cause a lot of profitability issues. So we also want to be, right, liability lines of business, casualty lines of business, or property and casualty insurance company. So the next thing we'll talk about is legal system abuse. Sometimes called social inflation, but I think legal system abuse is a much better terminology for it. And what's driving that, and some of the things we've seen more recently in the last 3 to 4 years is what's called third-party litigation funding. Is anyone familiar with what that is? I'll give you a brief introduction into it. So yeah, Mark, you probably know very well what that is back there. But think of hedge fund investors in Russia and in Germany that are investing in litigation in the United States. So let's say Doug, he was injured, severe injury, and the insurance company offers him a good settlement that makes him whole, gets him a little pain and suffering, $500,000 offer we made to him. It's fair to him, it's fair to the insurance company, but now a third-party litigator comes in with an attorney and says, hey, we're going to go after $20 million, and we will fund all the litigation. If we win, we'll give you $2 million, and we'll keep the $18 million. And so people are signing up left and right. because, hey, I can't lose. Well, actually they can, because if they lose the case, they could possibly get nothing. But what that's doing is driving up costs, because they might come in and win 1 out of every 8, 9, or 10 cases. But when you're making the big windfall, it's making it worth it. So you've got hedge funds that are investing in litigation. And one of the issues is there is no disclosure about who is funding that litigation. As the insurance company representing the defendant, the one who's being sued, we have to disclose that. So the juries know that there's big bucks that are backing, supposedly big bucks backing the claimant, behind the defendant. But what they don't understand is that there's even bigger bucks in some cases that's backing the lawsuit itself. And that lack of disclosure, so if the jury really knew that this hedge fund's gonna get $18 million and the person that they're feeling sorry for is only gonna get 2, that could have a pretty big impact on what direction they decide to go with a jury settlement. In addition, those hedge funds are not paying any taxes on anything that they are earning. And so I've been in Washington working in different trade organizations trying to get some legislation passed to make this at least disclosure so that juries know who is funding that litigation, but also then to put tax requirements on any of those earnings to make it more consistent with any other investment that companies are making. I serve on a number of trade organizations, one of which is the APCIA, American Property and Casualty Insurance Association. And they actually came out with a number a couple weeks ago that it's costing the average household in America $3,400 because of legal system abuse. So what does that mean? Well, it costs more to have your product shipped because of lawsuits like this. It costs more. I mean, we had a claim with a combine in a store, an implement store, where a guy lost a finger, and it was a significantly multi-million-dollar settlement in court that never should have gotten to that point, but that's where it went to. Well, what's that mean? That means now farm implement dealers are going to have to pay higher insurance to cover the cost because of the risk that exists, which means that now the price of corn has to go up. So when you combine all that across every different industry segment, $3,400 is what the average household is paying in legal system abuse costs. So it is pretty significant, and that is driving up insurance costs and making it difficult for insurers to make money, but then also pushing up costs of everything that we buy. The increasing plaintiff attorney contingency fees, eroding caps on damages, that's all contributing to that. And I could probably talk on this topic for the next 3 hours, so we'll move on. Another important topic that we're facing right now, and a lot of you, tariffs. And when I'm asked about this whole tariff situation, I basically say, the only thing that's certain is uncertainty. Because every day, every hour, what's the impact going to be? How's it going to impact us? Well, it could impact the cost of goods, right? Bringing in lumber from Canada, bringing in auto parts from overseas. It could, but it may not. And we can't go and start increasing rates in anticipation of what might be coming. So you almost have to sit back and wait and see, and recognize that it could take a long time before we really fully understand the true impact of what tariffs are going to do to our economy. Whenever you're faced with a hard market, companies have to respond. You have to figure out how you want to proceed. And so the past few years, we've done a lot to re-underwrite our book, focus on more segment-based underwriting, making sure we have a good spread of risk. We can't just write schools, and we can't just write this class or that class. We've got to have a very diversified portfolio and make sure we've got all the tools in place to help our underwriters across the country be successful in everything they're doing. Targeted actions to improve our overall book of business, getting off some classes of business that were really driving our lack of profitability, and then really focus on improved communication to our agents. So we do business exclusively through independent agents, and they have options of writing business with 15, 20, 25 different insurance companies. So we want to make sure we're being clear with them, helping them understand who we are, where it is that we're going, and how we can better partner with them. And what's been exciting, we've introduced a lot of change over the past 5 years, and especially even over the past few months. I was out in Las Vegas at a conference a couple weeks ago, and out visiting some agents in North Carolina just last week. And the amount of buzz that is being generated about EMC across the country has been just wonderful to see. Agents are excited, our team members are excited. We actually hired a guy to come in and help us through some change management. And he said, Scott, I've never been in a company with so much change where everyone's excited about the changes happening. So it's kind of fun to see as we're making all these pivots and making some tough decisions, but we've been, I think overall doing a good job of being transparent and also communicating the why we're making those changes, and people are really starting to believe it and get behind it. I'll just close things out and talk a little bit about AI, because AI is going to have an impact on all of us, especially and particularly in the insurance industry. And when you think about EMC's philosophy of keeping insurance human, how do you go about doing that? And I like to give the analogy. I spoke to a number of students a couple of days ago, and I asked them how many are Marvel fans. I won't do that to you to embarrass anybody. But when I think of AI, I use the analogy of Iron Man. So what do I mean by that? Well, Iron Man, Tony Stark. Tony Stark is Iron Man, but Tony Stark is just a normal human being. But he has special unique powers when he gets inside the Iron Man suit. He can shoot lasers, he can fly, he has all sorts of data at his fingertips. He's got Jarvis in his head feeding him information. But who's making decisions? It's still Tony Stark, right? Some insurance companies are looking to replace people with robots. And there's some degree that will happen, but I believe that keeping humans at the center of everything that we do is going to be critical to our success. And that means equipping our people with Iron Man suits so they have access to better data, so they can make better, faster decisions. And when people ask me, do you expect that jobs in the insurance world or even at EMC are going to be replaced by AI and by robots? And my response is, maybe a few will be, but I really believe that people who use AI effectively are going to replace people who don't know how to use AI. So my encouragement is, get out there, understand the tools, begin to leverage and understand. Because when you use AI, if you've ever used any of the AI tools, usually the first answer you get back isn't the best, right? There's got to be some ongoing interaction and dialogue going back and forth between AI. And so as I think about the future of artificial intelligence, it is going to change the way that we do a lot of things. But I still believe that humans are going to be a very important part of it. And even as I talk to students, they're already using AI, but my encouragement is, you need to make sure you're understanding what AI is doing behind the scenes. Someone someday is going to have to help program that AI. Someone's going to have to be able to validate and check what's coming out. And if you don't have that skill set yourself, you're not going to be as valuable as someone who does have those skill sets. You can make sure that they're validating and testing what's coming in and out of any artificial intelligence engine. So I was told I had about 20 minutes to talk, open for 5 minutes of Q&A. I talked through that relatively quickly because one thing that I absolutely love is Q&A. We do quarterly team meetings with 2,200 team members across the country. We'll open it for Q&A at the end. We always have a lot of great questions, and I really enjoy answering anything that's on anyone's mind. So with that, I will open things up for questions.
Scott, thank you for coming today. I actually have two questions. If I may. One, it would seem to me that you would prefer to price your business in a hard market as opposed to a soft market. If that's not correct, please tell me so and why that is. And the second question is, how is the insurance industry in general and EMC specifically evaluating the risk on self-driving features of automobiles?
Yeah, both good questions. The first question is regard to whether an insurance company rather price in a hard market versus a soft market. Well, there are actually positives and negatives to both. In a soft market, things are more competitive. But in a hard market, it requires a lot of our team members to deliver very challenging messages out to our agents and to policyholders. Anytime you're having to cancel policies or reduce coverage, nobody likes to hear those messages. So it's easier to underwrite per se, but people probably like their jobs less because they're having to deliver some tough messages. Soft markets where it's a lot more competitive, it is challenging, but it's a different kind of challenging. So I think both markets are challenging, but just what type of challenge? And the second question was?
Regarding insurance industries in general, and EMC specifically when it comes to insuring self-driving vehicles.
Yeah, so the second question is in regard to insuring self-driving vehicles. And, and Susan, you can even, I think we've even talked about this before, 10, 15 years ago, you'd read lots of articles about, hey, there's no longer going to be any more personal line insurance. It's all going to shift to the manufacturer who's going to have to provide that insurance. And that was being predicted to happen, 5 years ago. It hasn't happened, and I still don't see that happening in the near future. So to some degree, with a self-driving vehicle, they are safer because they have less error than human error, although you do see times where that's an issue, but it hasn't reduced insurance costs. Well, why is that? Because you have all these sensors, so anytime there is an accident, it's costing 4 times what it cost to repair the vehicle before. So, I think it is going to continue to pivot. I think we'll likely see more autonomous vehicles, especially in the trucking world on the road. So it is changing, but I don't think it's changing the insurance world as much as people thought it would, and I still think it's going to be a while before we see significant change and see that burden of insurance responsibility shifting to the manufacturers from the individual owners. Susan?
Scott, are you in all 51 jurisdictions?
We do not actively write in all states. We have a few states that we have intentionally stayed out of, maybe because the regulatory environment is difficult.
California?
We do write in California.
Good for you.
Well, an interesting thing about California, we write some property, but we were very specific about not writing in high wildfire areas. And so we had very little claims reported as a result of the wildfires. However, because the regulatory environment in California has been so challenging for many, many years, a lot of companies have left, and so we required them to create what's called the FAIR Plan, which is essentially a government-owned insurance company that was charging below actuarial sound rates. And so when an event like the recent wildfires happens, guess what? Money's not there. They go bankrupt. Where do they get their money? Well, they get their money by assessing the insurance companies that write business in the state. So even though we were prudent in our underwriting and didn't expose ourselves to high wildfire areas, we still ended up having to pay a pretty significant chunk of money because of the wildfires and because of the regulatory environment that exists. What that does, though, it makes companies less likely to want to write in California or any other states that have those type of restrictions. And Susan knows that well. Iowa's been a great state to do business in.
Scott, a couple things. One, what is your company policy on working from home? What do you see that being in the future? And two, we continue to see corporate travel is still not back to normal levels, at least here in our metro. What's your policy on corporate travel? Do you have limitations? Are you doing more Teams, Zoom meetings?
No, great question. So the first question was in regard to working from home and flexible working arrangements. So we have taken a fairly progressive approach to allowing our team members to work remotely. A lot of the time, we don't have any set number of days that people need to be in the office. But we've actually found that to be a competitive advantage to us in recruiting some of the best talent. And it does require some different management skills, but what we do, though, is create meaningful connections. So you don't need to come into work to sit in your cubicle to do your heads down work. But we want you to come into work to have a meeting. And so we're encouraging people, Des Moines traffic's not too bad, even though some of us like to complain about it, right? But if you're out in Chicago and it takes you an hour and a half to get into the office every day, I can understand why you would want to work remote. But if you wait till 9 or 9:30 or 10, maybe not in Chicago, but in a lot of communities, if you wait a little bit, you can get into the office no problem. So I'm like, well, work from home in the morning, do some of your heads down work in the morning, come in at 9:30, you have some meetings, have some human interaction, and go home that afternoon before the traffic picks up. So we're encouraging people to find creative and innovative ways. We've got team members out in Washington. We don't have an office in Washington. Our nearest office is in Boise, Idaho. We've got 3 team members in Washington that all get together on a regular basis. So they don't have an office to go to, but they're creating meaningful connections. So what we're trying to do is say we're not going to have a hard and fast rule about when and where you need to be in the office, but we expect people to be developing relationships and creating meaningful connections together. In regard to the other question was on travel, we do have a lot of people traveling. I travel quite a bit getting out to our 17 offices. I serve on, I think, 14 different boards. So involvement on those boards, being involved in different speaking engagements, meeting with our independent agents across the country. And we've got a lot of team members that are doing a lot of travel too. We've got a conference of our entire Marcom team from around the country, all in Des Moines. Last year, we hosted at the EMC Expo Center, used to be Hy-Vee Hall. We had our first ever One EMC event. We brought in 1,700 of our 2,200 employees across the country, all in for a single 2-day event. Scott Hamilton was our keynote speaker. So I think for a time, our travel got reduced, but we have been now focused a lot more on, we need to create meaningful connections and get people back together. So I think our travel budget may actually be above today where it was back in 2019.
Georgia just passed a fairly comprehensive tort reform bill that included third-party litigation funding disclosures. Do you think there's any political appetite here to do something like that?
Yeah, so the question is, and Georgia just passed a bill, tort reform, and portions of that include addressing third-party litigation funding, and I think there is some interest even in Iowa. I've seen a couple of bills that have kind of floated around last year. We don't have the issue in Iowa, like, now it could come here, right? But Iowa's been a much better venue to be in. And if you have driven through Georgia or South Carolina in the past couple of years, when you get out on the interstate, it's remarkable. I think every 10th of a mile, there are 3 billboard signs, hey, were you injured? Call me, call this. I've brought in over billions of dollars in the past 10 years to injured clients. And so the environment down in Georgia and South Carolina has been very litigious, and a lot of companies have been reducing what they write down there. And we had a large claim from down south earlier this year as well. So litigation, or addressing litigation funding and tort reform are going to be key elements of that. It's not a major issue in Iowa, but I think once some of them recognize that they won't be as successful in South Carolina and Georgia anymore, they're going to start moving to other states, and we need to be prepared for it.
Scott, you mentioned insuring a lot of schools in Iowa. Would you speak to your position on allowing teachers to carry firearms?
Bit of a loaded question there, but thank you, Mark. I appreciate that so much. No, so I won't speak as to my personal decision or EMC's decision on whether or not schools can allow teachers to carry firearms. That's their decision. I will speak as to EMC's position on the insurability of that, however. And anytime that you introduce additional firearms into a school, it does create some additional risk and some potential additional liability. So if you have a teacher who has a firearm and it accidentally goes off, that could be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And so we've taken the position that we're not taking a political position at all. We're taking a risk-based decision and saying, so we had decided we were not going to write a couple of schools a couple of years ago because of their position on, actually they had acquired firearms for their teachers to carry. And not the political decision, but more of just a risk management decision. That's something that I, as an actuary, am not qualified to price. There's no data that helps you price that. So anytime you have risks like that where the data is not available or you just don't know how to price it, a lot of those policies, a lot of those risks will end up in what's called excess and surplus lines insurance. So we are required to follow a lot of set of rules of the insurance regulators. We have to file our rates, and it's called a bidded business. So we have very little flexibility in what we can do. Excess and surplus lines, that means they couldn't get insurance anywhere else. So those underwriters have a lot more flexibility in pricing and risk. And so when you introduce something new like that, it really becomes more of an excess and surplus type lines risk where you need some specialists to be able to price it out individually. And we don't have the capability to do that as an admitted company. So our decision was we're not going to insure schools that choose to go that direction.
One more question, Scott. One more.
Okay, I saw another one back there.
So what is the industry doing, your industry associations doing to communicate about the climate policy with this administration and how that affects our energy policy, climate policy, and how that affects your business?
Yeah, so the question is really, what are we doing about climate policy and working with the current administration? And there's not a ton that we can do. A lot of the focus that we've had has been focused on resiliency and education. So building more resilient properties. So the III, the Insurance Information Institute, they've got a whole coalition that's working how can we provide incentives and build incentives into what we do to help build more resilient properties. So property that can withstand a hailstorm, a property that can withstand a Category 3 hurricane, for example, and stop building in the high-risk areas, right? It's, some of these wildfire risks, it's not a matter of when you have a wildfire, or if you have a wildfire, it's when you're gonna have the wildfire. So maybe we shouldn't be building there. Instead of building a house in a high floodplain, maybe we shouldn't be building there. And so trying to approach it from that perspective, it's going to be challenging to change the weather overnight. But one thing we can start doing is start focusing on how can we make the properties that we're insuring more resilient. So. Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Scott, thank you for taking time in your busy schedule, spend an hour with us today. Thanks for all you're doing and leading one of the great companies in Des Moines. And also, we see you out there making our community better. So I appreciate all your work there in the broad community as well. Okay, upcoming meetings. Next week, we have, again, one of our bigger days of the year, the Police and Firefighter of the Year Award. So that is always a great program, and I will be passing the gavel to Tim. So, yeah, look forward to that. No meeting on the 3rd to celebrate the July 4th holiday with everybody, and then we will meet on July 10th, Tim's first meeting with Empower Tanzania as the keynote for that. So again, thank you, Scott. Thank you to our guests for joining us. Great to see everybody. Make it a great Rotarian week. We are adjourned.